Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. If you're over 55 and you're still doing things just to keep everyone else happy, have you ever stopped to ask yourself how many invisible burdens you're still carrying around? We spend decades trying to fit in, accumulating stuff, meeting other people's expectations. We work hard, raise our families, build our careers. But somewhere along the way, we forget that there comes a time when it's not just okay to let go, it's essential. Picture this for a moment. You're carrying a heavy backpack. Inside it are all the obligations you took on out of love, the opinions you swallowed to avoid conflict, the guilt you've been hauling around for years, the shoulds and supposed tos that society handed you decades ago. That backpack is heavy, and every single day, life gives you a choice. You can open it up and start taking things out, or you can keep trudging forward, getting more tired with each step. Here's what I've learned after talking to thousands of people in their second act of life. Most of us spend our entire lives collecting things, responsibilities, commitments, other people's opinions, until one day we realize we can barely move forward anymore. But something beautiful happens after 55. Your body starts asking for calm. Your soul starts demanding truth. Your heart begins crying out for freedom. This isn't just about getting older. This is about getting wiser. This is about understanding that you've earned the right to choose what stays and what goes. The ancient Stoics understood this better than anyone. Marcus Aurelius, who had the weight of an entire empire on his shoulders, wrote, "It is not the burden that breaks us, but the way we choose to carry it." This video isn't a list of tips. It's an invitation to finally put down what's been weighing you down, to live without the guilt, to choose without asking permission. Because if life gives us anything after 55, it's the opportunity to become light again, like leaves that fall gently without rushing, knowing they've completed their cycle and it's time for something new. You've spent decades being the responsible one, the dependable one, the one who always says yes. But what if I told you that your most important years might just be ahead of you? What if the best chapter of your life starts the moment you decide to travel lighter? So I want to walk through 11 things with you today. 11 burdens that, if you're brave enough to set them down, can give you back your sparkle, your laughter, and the pure joy of simply being yourself. Now, let me give you a taste of what's coming. Number 3 on this list is something that Warren Buffett, at 94, finally stopped doing after decades of success. When he shared this in a recent interview, it shocked even his closest friends. Number 7 was actually practiced by Marcus Aurelius himself, the most powerful man in the ancient world, who discovered that real power comes from letting go of this one thing that most people cling to their entire lives. And number 9, this is the burden that Oprah Winfrey talks about releasing in her 60s. She calls it the invisible weight that was crushing my spirit. When she finally dropped it, she said it was like breathing for the first time in decades. But here's what might surprise you most. Number 11 is something that 90% of people over 55 are carrying right now, and they don't even know it. It's so deeply embedded in American culture that we think it's a virtue, but the ancient Stoics knew it was actually a prison. These aren't just ideas. They're the same principles that have freed some of the wisest, most successful people in history, and today they can free you too. Some of these might surprise you. Others might make you uncomfortable. Number 5 might even make you angry at first. It goes against everything we were taught about being a good person. But I promise you this, every single one of them has the power to change how you feel when you wake up tomorrow morning. Before we dive in, if this message is resonating with you already, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell.
Every day, we're here sharing wisdom for your second active life because your best years don't have to be behind you. They can be right now, starting today. Are you ready to start unpacking that heavy backpack you've been carrying? Let's begin with the heaviest burden of all, one that most of us don't even realize we're carrying.
At a certain age, the silence starts talking to us. And many times, what it tells us is this: what if you didn't have to please anyone else anymore? If you're 55 or older, life is inviting you to stop living for everyone else and start living for yourself. For decades, you were the son, the husband, the father, the employee, the provider. And in each of those roles, you molded yourself to fit in. Dress like this, don't say that. What will the neighbors think? Without realizing it, many of your decisions were marked by a silent fear, the fear of judgment. And even though today you might not have a boss breathing down your neck or young children depending on you for everything, that fear might still be there, hidden in how you choose your clothes, what you share in conversations, or what you decide not to do, just to avoid comments. But stop for a moment, breathe, and ask yourself honestly, how much of what you keep quiet, postpone, or endure is just so you don't upset other people? Psychology has proven that the fear of others' judgment is a form of learned social anxiety. And when you reach this stage of life, continuing to carry that fear only keeps you away from the emotional freedom you've earned. Those mirror neurons that once helped us read others so we could adapt, at this age, they can become invisible chains if we don't learn to let go. Epictetus said it clearly over 2,000 years ago. It's not what happens to you, but how you interpret what happens to you that matters. And many times, that interpretation is a story we invent to avoid being judged, when in reality, nobody is even watching anymore. Let me tell you about Robert. At 67, he'd been wanting to take art classes for years. Every time he brought it up, someone would say, "Art classes? Isn't that a bit unusual for a retired engineer? What will people at the country club think?" And Robert, not wanting to rock the boat, would put his dream on hold. Until one day he realized he'd spent more time worrying about what others thought than actually living. He signed up for watercolor classes without telling anyone. 3 months later, he called his daughter from his first small art exhibition. His voice had a lightness she hadn't heard in years. Robert hadn't just learned to paint. He'd rediscovered who he was underneath all those expectations. So now I'm asking you, what would you do if no one had an opinion? What would you say if you knew no one was going to judge you? What part of you is still waiting for permission to live? You're not here to explain every step you take. You're here to enjoy the journey. This stage of life isn't for pleasing others. It's for honoring yourself. And there's no deeper honor than being true to what you genuinely feel. Maybe it's something small, changing your style, choosing how to spend a Sunday, picking up an old hobby. Or maybe it's something big, deciding who you allow in your home or who you stop calling altogether. Whatever it is, do it for you. Remember what Marcus Aurelius said, "If you worry about what other people think, you will be their prisoner. If you act according to your nature, you will be free." This is your moment. Stop living in the reflection of others' expectations. The only opinion that matters is yours,
because only you know what you've lived through, what you've endured, and what you're still here to enjoy.
There's a silent dilemma that many people face after 55. How do you love your children and grandchildren deeply without losing yourself in the process? The line between caring and self-erasure, between supporting and disappearing, is thinner than it appears. From a young age, we're taught that being a good parent means sacrifice. And then, when the grandchildren arrive, the story repeats itself. Be available, help out, say yes even when your body is asking for rest. But at this stage of life, there's a question that becomes urgent. How much of your freedom are you giving up just to avoid disappointing the people you love? There's a phrase from Marcus Aurelius that invites reflection. Love, but not at the cost of yourself. Love cannot be a permanent surrender of your own desires, needs, or space. Family psychology has proven this. Many older adults fall into a pattern of reverse dependency. It's no longer the children who need guidance. It's the parents who feel obligated to keep caregiving just to maintain their place in the family. And in that process, without noticing it, they hand over their independence. Let me tell you about Margaret. At 72, she was living independently, active with her routines, her book club, her garden. But one day, her daughter asked her to move in with them to be better taken care of. Margaret agreed out of love and fear of seeming selfish. At first, everything seemed fine, but over time, she started feeling like a shadow in her own life. She didn't choose what to eat, didn't decide her schedule, couldn't even pick the TV program. She became polite, but silent, present, but absent, until one afternoon, sitting on the porch, she thought, "I'm alive, but I've stopped living." She decided to move back to her own place. Her daughter cried, didn't understand at first, but with time, she too came to understand that love cannot be born from obligation. It must come from respect. The key is finding balance. You can be present in your children's and grandchildren's lives without disappearing from your own. You can love without being available 24/7. You can say no without loving any less. Ask yourself, what spaces have you given up without realizing it? When was the last time you chose something just for yourself? What part of your routine is actually yours? As Seneca said, freedom is the greatest good of the wise. And at this age, being wise means not confusing giving with abandoning yourself. It's understanding that taking care of yourself is also part of taking care. A happy, autonomous grandmother or grandfather at peace with themselves is the best gift they can give their family, because they teach by example that love doesn't need control or silent sacrifices. It only needs authentic presence. So if you feel like you're losing your voice to avoid breaking a mold, remember this: your life didn't end when your children grew up. It's just opening to another chapter, and it deserves to be lived with dignity, joy, and freedom. Now this is the one I promised you, about Warren Buffett. At 94, one of the wealthiest and most successful investors in history did something that shocked even his closest friends and business partners. In a recent interview, he admitted that he had finally stopped doing something he'd been doing for over 7 decades. He stopped defining himself by his work. "For most of my life," Buffett said, "when people asked who I was, I would immediately think investor, businessman, CEO. But one day I realized that's what I do, not who I am. I'm Warren. I like cherry Coke. I enjoy reading. I love spending time with my family. The business was never supposed to become my identity." This revelation from one of America's most work-focused icons sends a powerful message to all of us who've spent decades climbing ladders, building careers, and measuring our worth by our professional achievements. After 55, many people face what psychologists call an identity crisis of retirement.
For 30, 40, even 50 years, you were the doctor, the teacher, the manager, the business owner. You introduced yourself by your title. Your value was measured by your productivity, your salary, your position on the corporate ladder. But here's what happens when that structure disappears. If you've spent your entire life being what you do instead of who you are, retirement can feel like losing yourself completely. The ancient Stoics understood this trap well. Epictetus, who went from slave to one of history's greatest philosophers, taught, "You are not your role. You are not your position. You are not even your accomplishments. You are the consciousness that experiences all of these things." Let me tell you about David. For 35 years, he was David the district sales manager. Every conversation started with work. Every social gathering became a networking opportunity. His business cards were extensions of his identity. When he retired at 63, he fell into a deep depression. "I don't know who I am anymore," he told his wife. "Without the company, what's left of me?" It took David 2 years and some gentle counseling to realize he'd confused his job description with his life description. He started introducing himself simply as David, a man who loves woodworking, enjoys hiking, and has great stories to tell. He discovered that people were actually more interested in him as a person than they had ever been in him as a sales manager. The truth is, your career was never your identity. It was just something you did very well for a very long time. You are not your job title, your salary, your corner office, or even your greatest professional achievement. Ask yourself, when someone asks who you are, do you immediately think of what you used to do for work? Do you feel less valuable because you're no longer climbing the career ladder? Are you still introducing yourself by your former title? Marcus Aurelius, who held the ultimate job as Emperor of Rome, wrote in his personal journal, "Be careful not to let your position become your person. When the position ends, if you've confused the two, you'll feel like you've lost yourself." This stage of life is your chance to rediscover who you are underneath all those professional roles. You're not retired David or former manager Sarah. You're David, who happens to love model trains, and Sarah, who makes incredible apple pie and has a sharp sense of humor. Your worth was never determined by your productivity. Your value doesn't decrease when your paycheck stops. You are not what you achieved. You are who you are when all the achievements are set aside. As Warren Buffett learned at 94, the most successful thing you can do is remember that you are not your resume. You're a human being with interests, passions, quirks, and wisdom that has nothing to do with any job you ever held. It's time to stop introducing yourself by what you used to do for work and start celebrating who you've always been.
For decades, we were taught to save, to never throw anything away just in case, to fill drawers, closets, and storage units with things that somehow gave us security. But as time passes, those things stop protecting us and start imprisoning us. After 55, many people find themselves living surrounded by objects they no longer use, but can't bring themselves to let go of. Clothes that no longer fit, appliances that haven't worked in years, furniture taking up space, books gathering dust. But behind every accumulated item is an untold story. Fear of emptiness, attachment to the past, beliefs that throwing away means losing something important. The psychology of detachment explains that the more we cling to material things, the harder it becomes to flow with life's changes. And at this stage, when your body is asking for space and your mind is craving calm, possessions can become invisible chains. Marcus Aurelius said it perfectly. The more you own, the more you are owned by what you own.
He wasn't just talking about money or expensive items. He was talking about the weight of the unnecessary, that silent burden that accumulates in the corners of our homes and our souls. Think about Julia. At 71, she lived alone in a large house filled with things. Every object had its story, but also its dust, its weight, its painful memory. One day, she stopped in front of a closet and thought, "Who am I keeping all this for?" That question led her to a profound process. She started giving away, donating, clearing out. It wasn't easy. Each box that left felt like losing a piece of her history, but with every item that went out the door, she felt like she could breathe better. As if instead of losing something, she was recovering something else entirely. Lightness, space, freedom. Because the important memories aren't stored in objects. They live in your skin, in your memory, in your gestures. And when you release what you no longer need, you make room for what actually matters, the present moment. The American dream taught us that accumulation equals security. But at this stage of life, you're discovering that true security comes from knowing you can live with less and be perfectly content. It comes from opening a closet without feeling guilt, looking around your home and saying, "Everything here makes me feel good." Ask yourself honestly, how many of your things do you actually use? How many do you keep just out of habit? What would it feel like to let go of just one of them right now? Seneca said it clearly. It is not the one who has more who is richer, but the one who needs less. And at this age, true wealth is being able to move with lightness, to open a drawer without feeling overwhelmed, to look at your space and know that only what truly serves you remains. So if there's something that no longer serves, that no longer adds value, that no longer resonates with who you are today, let it go. You're not losing anything. You're gaining space for yourself. And that's one of the most valuable gifts of this stage of life. Living with less, but living better. Your home should be a sanctuary, not a storage unit. Your space should reflect who you are now, not who you used to be. Every item you choose to keep should earn its place by bringing you joy, utility, or peace. Remember, you're not your possessions. You're not what you own. You're the person who has lived, loved, learned, and grown. And that person deserves to live in a space that feels like freedom, not a museum of the past.
Now, this is the one that might make you angry at first, because everything we were taught about being a good person told us that putting others first was virtuous, noble, even necessary. For many years, maybe you were taught that loving meant sacrificing yourself, that taking care of others, even at your own expense, was what good parents, good spouses, good people do. And yes, during part of life, that made sense. When children were small, when aging parents needed support, when the world demanded you be available. But here's what nobody told you. There comes a time when continuing to give everything while having nothing left for yourself isn't noble. It's self-destructive. And that time is often right around 55 and beyond. The problem isn't helping others. The problem is forgetting that you matter too. Because if you burn yourself out completely, you won't be able to light anyone else's way. Many older adults feel exhausted not because of the passage of time, but because of the emotional weight of continuing to solve everything for everyone. Psychologists call it chronic caregiver syndrome, when your entire life revolves around others' well-being and yours gets pushed to the end of the line. Marcus Aurelius said it clearly. First, take care of the soul that was entrusted to you. And which soul is that? Yours, because you can't pour from an empty cup. Let me tell you about Patricia. Her entire life, she was the caretaker. She was mother, grandmother, wife, the family's unofficial nurse, counselor, and problem solver. Even at 73, she was still available to everyone.
She never said no, always ready to cook, listen, lend money, give advice, until one day her body spoke up. A minor illness, but a clear message: exhaustion. And in that moment, she understood that she also deserved to take care of herself. She started saying no without guilt. She began resting without explaining herself. She started doing things just for herself: painting, walking, sitting in silence. And the most beautiful thing happened. Her family didn't fall apart. On the contrary, they began to see her with more respect. Because she was no longer the woman who was always available. She was the wise woman who chose herself. Now, I'm asking you, how many times have you postponed yourself to attend to others? Have you felt guilty for saying no? What would you do today if you only thought about your own well-being? This isn't selfishness, it's self-love. And self-love doesn't take you away from those you care about. It strengthens you so you can love them better from a healthy place. Here's what makes this particularly challenging for Americans. We've been raised on the idea that self-sacrifice is the ultimate virtue. Put family first. Always be there for others. Don't be selfish. But there's a difference between healthy giving and depleting yourself until there's nothing left. As Epictetus said, don't say you lost something, say you returned it. Well, it's time to return some time to yourself, some attention, some care. Because if you don't do it, now, when will you? Your later years shouldn't be your final sacrifice. They should be your greatest freedom. So the next time you feel pressure to be available to everyone, stop, breathe, ask yourself, and when do I take care of me? Because if you don't take care of yourself, nobody else can the way you need it done. You've spent decades being everyone else's anchor. Now it's time to be your own.
How many times have you gotten dressed without enthusiasm, smiled without desire, and said yes when deep down you wanted to stay home? How many times have you sat at a table full of people and still felt completely alone? After 55, every minute has more value. This is no longer the time to go places out of duty or to spend energy on gatherings that leave you feeling emptier rather than fulfilled. And yet, many people continue accepting invitations just to avoid looking bad, to keep up with family expectations, or out of fear of seeming antisocial. But let me ask you something. Who's defending your peace if you're not doing it yourself? Psychology confirms it. Older adults who learn to say no assertively live with more serenity and fewer stress symptoms. Because it's not about becoming isolated, it's about becoming selective. It's about consciously choosing where and with whom to spend your precious time. The philosopher Simone Weil said, "Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity." And that includes attention toward yourself, paying attention to your own desires, your own rhythms, asking yourself, does this add to my life or drain from it? Let me tell you about Linda. For decades, she hosted family gatherings every Sunday. She did it out of love, but over the years, it became a burden. She no longer enjoyed cooking for everyone, but she felt that if she didn't do it, the family would fall apart. One day, her granddaughter asked her, "Grandma, when do you rest?" That question shook her. She decided to make a change, to do less, to simplify. And in that decision, she found something she hadn't felt in years: lightness. Here's what's particularly challenging about American social culture. We're expected to show up, to be present at every birthday, every barbecue, every holiday gathering, every community event. There's this unspoken rule that good people don't decline invitations, that family loyalty means always saying yes.
But attending events out of obligation is saying yes to others and no to yourself. And you matter too. Your energy matters. Your need for calm matters. Your desire to spend a quiet Sunday afternoon reading a book or working in your garden matters just as much as anyone else's social expectations. At this stage of life, with the maturity you have, you can choose without guilt. Ask yourself, which of my social commitments actually nourish me? Which ones could I stop attending without the world falling apart? Saying no isn't closing the door on others, it's opening the door to your well-being. It's saving yourself for what truly matters, for what makes you laugh, feel alive, and enjoy the moment. You're not here to keep meeting other people's expectations. You're here to live your truth. And if that means staying home with a cup of tea and a good book instead of going to another obligatory dinner party, then that's the best event in the world, because it's yours. Remember what Seneca taught. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. Don't waste another weekend on gatherings that feel like work instead of joy. Your presence should be a gift you choose to give, not a tax you're forced to pay. Save your energy for the people and events that light you up, not the ones that dim your spirit.
Here's the one I promised you about Marcus Aurelius. Picture this: the most powerful man in the ancient world, ruler of an empire that stretched from Britain to the Middle East, with armies at his command and the ability to change laws with a word. And yet, in his private journal, what we now call his meditations, he wrote something that reveals the secret to true power. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Think about that. The man who could control nations discovered that real power comes from letting go of trying to control what you cannot control. And what he couldn't control was everything outside his own thoughts, choices, and responses. This wasn't just philosophy for Marcus Aurelius. It was survival. He dealt with plagues, wars, betrayals, family tragedies, and the constant pressure of leadership. He could have driven himself insane trying to control every outcome, every person, every situation. Instead, he found freedom in focusing only on what was truly his to control. After 55, this becomes one of the most liberating truths you can embrace. How much energy are you still spending trying to control your adult children's choices? How much stress are you creating by trying to manage your spouse's habits, your neighbor's opinions, or your grandchildren's behavior? Here's what the psychology research shows. People who struggle with control issues experience significantly higher levels of anxiety, frustration, and depression. Meanwhile, those who practice what psychologists call radical acceptance, accepting what they cannot change, report greater peace and life satisfaction. Let me tell you about George. At 68, he was driving himself crazy trying to control everything around him. His son's career choices, his daughter-in-law's parenting style, his wife's spending habits, even the weather ruining his golf plans. Every day was a battle against reality, and George was losing every fight. One day, his wife handed him a piece of paper with Marcus Aurelius's quote on it. "Maybe," she said gently, "it's time to stop fighting wars you can't win." That simple message changed everything for George. He started asking himself, is this something I can actually control? If the answer was no, he practiced letting it go. The transformation was remarkable. George stopped giving unsolicited advice to his adult children. He stopped getting angry about traffic he couldn't change. He stopped worrying about things that might happen that he couldn't prevent. And for the first time in years, he found peace. Here's the American twist on this. We're raised to believe we can control our destiny, achieve anything we set our minds to, make things happen through sheer willpower. And while that drive serves us well in building careers and raising families, it can become a prison if we don't learn when to let go.
You cannot control your adult children's life choices. You cannot control your spouse's moods. You cannot control the economy, the weather, other people's opinions, or how long you'll live. You cannot control aging, illness, or loss. But here's what you can control: how you respond to all of these things. You can control your attitude, your words, your daily choices, where you put your attention, and how you spend your remaining time. Ask yourself, what are you trying to control that's actually outside your control? How much energy are you wasting in battles you cannot win? What would it feel like to surrender the illusion of control and find peace in acceptance? Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful ruler in history, found his greatest strength not in commanding others, but in mastering himself. He discovered that the ultimate power is the power to choose your response to whatever life brings you. This is your invitation to claim that same power. Stop exhausting yourself trying to control the uncontrollable. Focus your energy on what's actually yours to manage, because as the emperor himself learned, true freedom comes not from controlling everything around you, but from accepting what you cannot change and taking full responsibility for what you can.
For years, you took care of everyone else, your work, your family, your responsibilities. But now that you have more time, who's taking care of you? Talking about mental and emotional health at this stage of life is still somewhat taboo, but it's precisely when everything seems calmer on the outside that the soul often starts speaking louder on the inside. Many older adults live with a quiet sadness, a sense of emptiness that's not visible but is deeply felt. Mood changes, apathy, anxiety, sleeplessness, it's not always depression, but it is a signal that something inside is asking for attention. Have you ever found yourself smiling on the outside while feeling a knot inside? Waking up without enthusiasm even though you slept well? Or sometimes not knowing who to talk to about what you're really feeling? Psychology explains it clearly. When emotions aren't expressed, they accumulate, and over the years they can turn into physical ailments, chronic fatigue, or a deep sense of loneliness even when you're surrounded by people. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Tranquility comes when you stop trying to control what you cannot and focus on what you can." And that focus starts with you, with your inner world. Let me tell you about Richard. He was 71, living what appeared to be a quiet, comfortable life, but he felt a constant unease that he couldn't explain. It wasn't illness, it wasn't obvious sadness, until he decided to start talking about it. He began writing in a journal, then joined a men's discussion group at his local community center, and finally worked up the courage to see a counselor. He didn't need a diagnosis, he just needed a space to be heard. Over time, he recovered something he'd lost: enthusiasm. He rediscovered interests he'd forgotten about. He started volunteering at the local library, teaching computer skills to other seniors. The simple act of acknowledging his inner world and talking about it changed everything. Here's what's particularly challenging in American culture. We're taught to tough it out, to keep your chin up, to not burden others with our problems. Especially for men of this generation, asking for help with emotional issues can feel like weakness. But here's the truth. Taking care of your mental health isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Mental health isn't just for young people, it's a human need. And it's an act of self-respect to pay attention to yourself, to accept that feeling down is also part of the journey. That asking for help isn't failure, but courage. A good friend, an honest conversation, or a creative activity can be medicine for the soul. Sometimes it's professional counseling. Sometimes it's joining a group of people who understand what you're going through. Sometimes it's as simple as calling that old friend you've been meaning to reach out to. Ask yourself, how are you really doing on the inside? What are you needing that you're not giving yourself? Who could you talk to about what you're carrying in silence? You're not alone, and you don't have to figure everything out by yourself. As Epictetus said, it's not what happens to us, but how we interpret what happens to us that affects us. And you can start interpreting your life in a kinder, brighter, more honest way with yourself. Today, more than ever, you deserve to feel good inside, without masks, without having to prove anything. Taking care of your emotional health is taking care of yourself. It's giving yourself a place in your own life because you need someone to listen to you too, even if that someone is yourself.
This is the burden that Oprah Winfrey talked about releasing in her 60s. In a candid interview, she described it as the invisible weight that was crushing my spirit. For decades, she felt the pressure to always be Oprah. Wise, positive, put together, the woman who had all the answers and never had a bad day. I was suffocating under the weight of everyone's expectations, she said. People wanted me to be inspirational 24/7, to always have the right words, to never be human. I felt like I was performing my own life instead of living it. When she finally allowed herself to be imperfect, to have off days, to admit she didn't have all the answers, she described it as breathing for the first time in decades. The relief was so profound that it changed how she approached everything: her work, her relationships, her own self-worth. If Oprah Winfrey felt crushed by the weight of maintaining a perfect image, imagine how many of us are carrying this same invisible burden. After 55, many people are still exhausting themselves trying to be the perfect parent, the perfect grandparent, the perfect neighbor, the perfect retiree. Always having it together, always being positive, always having the right answer, never showing struggle or vulnerability. But here's what psychology tells us. The effort to maintain a perfect image is one of the most draining things we can do to ourselves. It creates what researchers call emotional labor, the constant work of managing how others see us instead of simply being who we are. The ancient Stoics understood this trap. Epictetus taught, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." In other words, don't try to convince everyone that you're wise, successful, or happy. Just be your authentic self and let that speak for itself. Let me tell you about Carol. At 64, she was the woman everyone called when they needed advice. She always had the right words, the perfect outlook, the ideal response to any crisis. But inside, she was exhausted from the constant performance. She felt like she couldn't have a bad day without disappointing people. One afternoon, when a friend called asking for her usual wisdom about a family problem, Carol said something she'd never said before. "I honestly don't know. I'm struggling with my own stuff today." Instead of being disappointed, her friend was relieved. "Thank God, I thought I was the only one who didn't have it all figured out." That moment of honesty transformed Carol's relationships. People stopped seeing her as the advice machine and started seeing her as a real person. Her friendships became deeper, more authentic, more mutual. Here's the American challenge. We're raised on the idea of putting your best foot forward. Fake it till you make it. Never let them see you sweat. Social media has made this even worse. Everyone's life looks perfect online while we know our own struggles intimately. But this stage of life is your permission slip to stop performing and start being. You don't have to be inspirational every day. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be the strong one in every situation. Ask yourself, how much energy are you spending maintaining an image instead of living your life? What would happen if you let people see the real you, struggles and all? Who are you trying to impress, and why does their opinion matter more than your peace? The truth is, people don't connect with your perfection, they connect with your humanity. Your grandchildren don't need you to be perfect, they need you to be real. Your friends don't need you to have all the answers, they need you to be genuine. As Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, how much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, but simply to what he does himself. Stop performing your life and start living it. The people who truly matter will love you more for your authenticity than they ever did for your perfect image. And those who can't handle the real you, well, they were never really seeing you anyway. Like Oprah discovered, the moment you stop trying to be perfect for everyone else is the moment you can finally breathe and be perfect for yourself.
Nothing drains joy quite like that little voice that whispers, "Look what others have accomplished, and you haven't." It's a silent trap and more dangerous than it appears. At 20, you compare yourself out of ambition. At 40, you compare out of competition. But at 55 and beyond, what's the point? Every life is a different book, and it makes no sense to compare chapter 12 of your story with chapter 7 of someone else's. But still, many people do it. They look at their neighbor's family, their friend's health, their cousin's vacation photos, and without realizing it, they start subtracting value from their own lives. What nobody sees is what you carried, the sleepless nights, the losses you didn't talk about, the quiet efforts, what you achieved even though nobody applauded it. That counts too, and it counts a lot. Psychology has studied this extensively. Constantly comparing yourself to others is linked to higher levels of dissatisfaction and depression. Meanwhile, focusing on your own path brings more peace, more gratitude, more meaning. Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations gave us an eternal truth. Don't waste any more time arguing about what a good person should be. Just be one. And what if you stopped looking sideways and started celebrating your own journey? Let me tell you about Frank. At 69, he used to feel inadequate every time he saw photos of his college friends on Facebook, traveling, surrounded by grandchildren, posting about their golf achievements. He didn't have children, never married, but he had built a small business that employed 12 people in his community for 30 years. One day, while watering his garden, he asked himself, what if my life isn't less than theirs, just different? He realized that his quiet satisfaction, his simple routines, his contribution to his employees' families was a form of fulfillment that was different but equally valid. And there's the secret. Accepting your story without needing to justify it, without comparing it, without looking for some invisible medal that will never come. Here's what makes this particularly challenging in American culture. We're constantly bombarded with other people's highlight reels. Social media shows us everyone's best moments while we know our own struggles intimately. We see retirement cruises while we're dealing with medical bills. We see happy family gatherings while we're spending holidays alone. But here's what those posts don't show. The arguments before the family photo, the debt behind the vacation, the loneliness in the big house, the health scares that don't make it to Facebook. Ask yourself, are you living your life or the one others make you think you should have? Have you stopped looking outward to find your worth and started looking inward? What would change if you celebrated your unique path instead of measuring it against others? Your journey included things others didn't face. Your resilience was tested in ways theirs wasn't. Your small victories happened in moments no one photographed. Your way of loving, of contributing, of simply being in the world is unrepeatable. At this age, the only thing you need to feel at peace is to stop competing in races that aren't yours and walk your own path with steady steps, with gratitude, with the certainty that what you've lived, with all its lights and shadows, was and is enough. As Seneca taught,
Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Stop comparing your chapter to someone else's book. Your story is the only one that matters because it's the only one that's truly yours. The comparison game has no winners, only people who forget to appreciate what they actually have. You've lived a life that no one else could live exactly the way you did. That's not a consolation prize. That's the grand prize.
Here it is, the burden I promised you that 90% of people over 55 are carrying right now, and most don't even realize it. It's so deeply embedded in American culture that we mistake it for a virtue. But the ancient Stoics recognized it for what it truly is, a prison. It's the constant need to justify your existence through productivity, achievement, or usefulness to others. Think about it. How often do you feel guilty for just relaxing? How many times do you feel like you need to explain what you did with your day? Do you find yourself saying things like, I should be doing something more important? Or, I feel useless just sitting here? This is the invisible weight that crushes so many people in their later years. After decades of measuring your worth by your output, your job performance, your income, your achievements, how busy you were, suddenly that framework disappears. And instead of feeling free, many people feel worthless. American culture taught us that our value comes from what we produce, what we achieve, how busy we are. Time is money. Idle hands are the devil's workshop. You're only as good as your last accomplishment. These messages run so deep that even when we've earned the right to rest, we feel guilty about it. But here's what the Stoics understood 2,000 years ago. Your worth as a human being has absolutely nothing to do with what you produce. Marcus Aurelius, despite being the most productive leader of his time, wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being." Notice he didn't say, as an emperor or as a leader, as a human being. Your job now is simply to be human, to exist, to experience, to appreciate, to love. That's it. That's enough. Let me tell you about William. At 72, he was driving himself crazy trying to stay productive. He volunteered at 3 different organizations, took on consulting projects he didn't enjoy, and filled every hour of his day with activities just so he could feel valuable. He was exhausted, but couldn't stop because stopping felt like admitting he no longer mattered. One morning, his wife found him sitting in their garden, not doing anything, just sitting. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Nothing," he replied, and then immediately felt guilty about it. That's when it hit him. Why should doing nothing feel wrong? Why couldn't he just exist without producing something? That day, William made a revolutionary decision. He gave himself permission to be rather than constantly do. He quit 2 of his volunteer positions. He turned down the consulting work. And for the first time in decades, he remembered what it felt like to simply be alive without having to prove it. Here's the truth that will set you free. You don't owe the world your productivity anymore. You don't have to earn your right to exist every single day. You don't need to justify taking up space on this planet. You've already contributed. You've already worked. You've already proven your worth 1,000 times over. Now you get to simply be. Ask yourself, when was the last time you did absolutely nothing without feeling guilty about it? How often do you feel like you need to justify how you spend your time? What would it feel like to believe that your existence alone is valuable?
Epictetus, who went from being a slave to one of history's greatest teachers, understood this better than anyone. You are not your role. You are not your productivity. You are not even your contributions. You are a human being, and that is enough. This is your official permission slip. You don't have to do anything to be worthy of love, respect, or taking up space in this world. You can spend an entire afternoon watching birds. You can read novels instead of self-improvement books. You can take naps without apologizing. You can have conversations that serve no purpose except enjoyment. Your worth is not a bank account that gets depleted when you stop producing. It's not a credential that expires when you retire. It's inherent. It came with you when you were born, and it stays with you until you leave. The most radical thing you can do in a culture obsessed with productivity is simply to exist and know that's enough. Because it is. You are enough. You have always been enough. And you will always be enough just by being you.
And now that you've walked this journey with me through these 11 burdens, let me ask you honestly, how many of them are you still carrying? You don't need to let go of everything today, just one. One single thing that you decide to release can open up space for something new, something that's truly meant for you. This stage of life isn't a surrender, it's a refinement. It's a precious opportunity to keep only what's essential, only what makes you feel good, only what resonates with who you are right now. Remember, you didn't make it this far to keep following other people's rules. You've made it this far to live your life your way, at your pace, with your truth. You've already given so much to this world. You've worked hard, raised families, contributed to your communities, paid your dues 1,000 times over. You've earned the right to be selective about where you spend your energy. You've earned the right to say no without explanation. You've earned the right to choose yourself. As Epictetus taught us, freedom isn't having everything you want. It's no longer wanting what you don't need. So choose it. Choose to let go of the weight. Choose lightness. Choose the life that you can still enjoy if you live it from a place of peace instead of pressure. The truth is, your best chapter might just be beginning, not because you're going to achieve more or accumulate more, but because you're finally going to be more yourself, more authentic, more free. If this message has touched something in you, I want you to do something important. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it's a friend who's still trying to please everyone. Maybe it's a family member who's forgotten they matter too. Maybe it's someone who's carrying burdens they don't even realize they can put down. Sometimes one conversation, one video, one moment of recognition can be the beginning of a completely new way of living. You could be the person who helps someone else find their freedom. And here's what I really want to know. In the comments below, tell me which of these 11 points surprised you the most, or which one made you rethink something about your own life. Was it the realization about defining yourself by your work? The permission to stop pleasing everyone? The freedom to just exist without justifying it? Your story matters. Your insight might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in carrying these burdens is the first step to putting them down. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because every day we're here sharing wisdom for your second act of life. Because your story isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning. Remember, you've spent decades being everyone's answer. Now it's time to be your own question, your own discovery, your own beautiful, authentic self. The backpack is right there beside you. You know which burdens no longer serve you. Today's as good a day as any to start traveling lighter. Your freedom is waiting, and you deserve every bit of it.